Pretty Girl Club. So, I want to talk about how I went on my journey of kind of building self esteem, building a skin tone identity. I want to talk about subliminals, affirmations, and all of these different sources of identity that I have utilized to kind of build myself up. So when I think of the word identity, I think that what a lot of people get wrong is that they think that everyone's identity is a monolith. They think that your identity can only be based on one or a few things. Notice how people will say, I'm a man first, or they'll say, he's a man first, she's a woman first, I'm black before anything else. So, what they're trying to say is that my identity is black centered, my identity is male centered, my identity is woman centered. And I try not to think of things that way because I like to have a multifaceted, multidimensional identity. And when I say that, what I'm saying is that I like to use hundreds of small things that help to give me a sense of self. So I'll start off by talking about affirmations. So you guys know that I actually grew up in a Christian background. I grew up mainly non denominational Christian, but when I was younger, on my dad's side of the family, they did go to all these different churches like Baptist or like Pentecostal and all that. And then as I got into my early 20s, I also would visit churches of all the different denominations. So even though I'm no longer religious, one thing that really helped me from the time I was a child was affirmations. So in the church, they call it confessions or like decreeing and declaring. So it's basically speaking life over yourself. That's another phrase that they use to describe it. But that's something that I've actually been doing since I was a little girl. So I used to say all of these little phrases out loud about myself. It's very similar to the affirmation movement that's happening online. I've noticed that even on YouTube, by the way, we have some exoticals who have subliminal channels. They've got channels where they do affirmations and stuff. So if you have one of those channels, please comment down below. And then if you guys want me to make something like that, then let me know and I can make something. It might be a little bit cheesy because I don't really know that much about making these videos myself. But the whole affirmation thing, that really did help me because a belief is really just a thought that you repeat to yourself over and over. And so this is why when you look at the agendas of Hollywood and stuff, first of all, I cringe whenever people say, we want to be represented in Hollywood. We want Hollywood to care about us. Hollywood was not created to build your self esteem. Hollywood was not created to be your therapist or to make you feel special and pretty. Hollywood was actually created for certain people to make money. Hollywood is utilized as a brainwashing tool. Hollywood, actually, in each ethnic community, they have certain agendas with each community, and they use brainwashing tactics and subliminal messaging to send messages to children or to kind of promote a certain image to those children to influence kids to grow up to behave a certain way. And so another thing that makes me cringe is like when black men will say, oh, well, I just became a degenerate because of the music I was listening to. And it's like, well, yeah, that's exactly what the creators of that music wanted you to do. They wanted you to become a degenerate. They wanted you to stay at the bottom so you can be basically a slave, aka an employee of someone else, or so that you can go to jail because remember, in the United States, jails, they want you to go to jail. Just in general, I'm not saying all of us or anything, but just in general, the prison system actually they provide labor. They do all this stuff that's like helping prop up our economy and stuff. It's helping prop up other people's wealth. So the way that I have always viewed media in general is this is a form of brainwashing. So one of the ways that I've been able to kind of build a sense of identity for myself is to brainwash myself in a positive way. And I think that part of the reason why some people don't like my channel is because they don't like that I'm uplifting women who look different than them, or they don't like that I'm kind of uplifting women who have a similar phenotype to what I show on this channel. But I don't care because my agenda is to, first of all, brainwash myself in a positive way, but also to help the collective women of my community to have positive self-esteem. And so, you know how you create a vision board? I'm not really that good at vision boards, but whenever I do my editing on these videos, I'm really using like these vision board style images. because all of my images are supposed to inspire you. They're supposed to create an imprint on your subconscious mind. I've noticed that whenever people talk about the subconscious mind, they think that like the only way for something to seep into your subconscious mind is if you don't know that it's happening, which is technically true, but it's like, okay, whatever you watch though, it's still seeping into your subconscious mind, which is why women who watch a lot of movies with a lot of white people, and let's say they're not white, it seeps into their subconscious mind that white girls are the love interests and stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, because you were not smart enough to take note of what you're watching and take note of how you're brainwashing yourself, how you're brainwashing your children. And so that's why I use images specifically curated to help brainwash you in a positive way. Or if you don't want to look at the video, if you just want to like listen to it or something while you're walking, everything that you hear is also seeping into your subconscious mind, because a belief is just a thought that you think over and over. So, what is a thought? Like, what is a thought in your mind? A thought is really just a sentence that you are speaking to yourself, like, "Oh, I'm tired." That's just a sentence that I spoke to myself in my mind. And so that's the whole concept of affirmations. It's supposed to be like you speaking either out loud or you just listening to somebody else speak positive things in the first person, and it's supposed to help introduce new thoughts into your head. And so that has been a phenomenal tactic that I learned actually from Christianity. So for that reason, that's why you don't really hear me bash religions on here. I really try my best to respect all religions because I do believe that all of the religions have different things that you can learn from, or they have things that can help you to kind of brainwash yourself in a positive way. What I don't like about religion is the ritual part of it and kind of the rules where it's like, oh no, that's a sin, or like you can't wear this, you can't do this, you can't talk to that person, you have to show up at this time and on Sundays do this, and it's the Sabbath. So for me, I don't really resonate with the rules, but I do resonate with affirming myself. So that is probably one of the biggest core pieces of my identity. And I've noticed, unfortunately, that's one of the biggest flaws that I've seen with other content creators on YouTube, just in general, just of any race or whatever. But every time you speak, every time you create a video, every time you have a conversation, if your conversations are focusing on the negative aspects of that person's phenotype or the negative aspects of your own identity, you're actually imprinting that into your subconscious mind and you're imprinting that into the minds of others. And so that's why on this channel, I talk a lot about privilege. I talk a lot about how to recognize your privilege because, by the way, I actually believe that everybody has a privilege. I think that everybody has at least a few different types of privileges. First of all, if you're alive, hello, that's a privilege. I don't want to die. So for a lot of people, they are not able to pinpoint their privileges because their brain literally does not have the neural pathways in it to see anything in a positive way. So now I'm kind of going back to my religious background. So for those of you who grew up in Christianity, or maybe you grew up in a different spirituality and you know about hexes and stuff like that. So the way that I view a hex is kind of like some sort of generational curse, or it's kind of like this loop that a person goes through. And when I think of loops, I think of like a thought loop, like how your brain keeps on circulating in the same direction. Nobody likes me. Everybody hates me. I'm at the bottom. White people are above me. Light-skinned people are above me. Mixed people are above me. I kind of view that as a form of like a quote unquote hex, even though I'm not even spiritual anymore. That's the best way I can describe it. It's almost like this generational curse that is passed down from mother to daughter to sister to cousin to friend. So I am very mindful with my words that I speak to myself, like in my own head. And I'm also very mindful of what I say on this YouTube channel. I'm very strategic with how I talk to you guys and just with how I carry myself in general because I like to think of myself as a princess. And if I think about how a princess operates, she is not walking around complaining about how underprivileged she is or like comparing herself to other princesses that are supposedly better than her. No, she is living her best life. She's living a soft life. So for me, one of my core identities is not just the affirmations, but also using these abstract characters or abstract beauty standards and kind of like tapping in to that character. So in my previous videos, I talked about healing your inner child and I talked about thinking about what you used to like as a little girl. So for me, it was always princesses. And so I try to do this fun little psychological experiment with myself, this fun brainwashing experiment where I'm like, okay, so I'm going to act like I'm a princess. So, what would a princess wear? What would she be doing? How would she view herself? Okay, so I'm going to put on a cute pink shirt today, and then I'm going to go for a walk in the park because I'm a princess. And, princesses love like nature and flowers. Whenever I think of princesses, I always think of like, how they show princesses like singing, or they're holding a bird on their hand or something, or they're kind of like connecting with nature somehow, or maybe they have like a pet or something. So I like to use these. I don't want to call it an alter ego because it's a part of me at this point, but it almost is. I guess I could say that you would start off viewing it as like this character or like an alter ego, and you just keep on doing that until it becomes a part of who you are. And at some point, other people are actually going to begin to notice that about you. So the weirdest thing that ever happened to me was when I was in my early 20s, I've always been into mermaids. Like, this is just really random, but I love like the mermaid colors. I love the aesthetic. I love the hairstyles, kind of the sparkly makeup and like the beach and all that. So I would always think of myself as kind of like this beautiful mermaid or something. And I noticed that other people, like eventually, after a couple years of kind of thinking of myself that way, other people started to tell me all the time, you look like a mermaid. You remind me of a mermaid. So looking back, I actually think, because remember, I'm not really a spiritual person. I'm more of a science person. So I actually think what happened was I had brainwashed myself so heavily into being this pretty mermaid. So, and by the way, I am not saying like, oh my God, I look so perfect and everything about me is perfect 24/7, because I think that's another misconception. I think sometimes people see my content and they think that I think that I'm just everything about me is perfect. No, I definitely still had flaws, whether it was like acne or like whatever physical flaws, but I was training my mindset to have this view of myself where I'm like, no, I'm a beautiful mermaid. And I brainwashed myself so heavily into this mermaid thing. I didn't realize it at the time, but I noticed I started picking jewelry, like earrings. I started wearing jewelry that looked like a large diamond stud, so kind of like treasure. I noticed that I also started naturally wearing more green and teal and blue and purple, so like mermaid colors. And I also noticed that my body standard for myself, like my beauty standard in terms of my body shape, it was very like curvy, so like a small waist. I do have a natural hourglass, but I was doing even more workouts to kind of tone my body so that I have even more of that snatched kind of Coke bottle shape. Another thing that I noticed about myself was that I had naturally begun wearing less foundation. So I do have a couple of tiny moles or freckles, whatever you want to call them, on my face. And so I kind of like that sun-kissed type of look or whatever. And another thing that I ended up doing was buying little hair barrettes or headbands or little flowers. You know how you can put a flower behind your ear and then you wear your hair down? Maybe it's wavy or curly or something. Back then, I used to wear my hair straight more often. And so people started saying that I look like a mermaid. So that's not my spiritual explanation. That's actually more of a science based explanation, which is I had brainwashed myself so much with the image of mermaids that I didn't even realize it, but I started to kind of dress that way just naturally without thinking about it consciously. I started to kind of dress that way and kind of like have that essence. So, whenever someone says you have the essence of so and so, what they really mean is you give me the vibes of that thing. So, I feel like because I kept brainwashing myself with that imagery of a mermaid, I started to naturally show off the vibes of a mermaid. And so that's one of the other ways that I built my self esteem. I would just flood myself with images of positive things. Like another thing I was very into when I was a teenager. So for those of you who grew up in the early 2000s, you guys already know this is back when like America's Next Top Model was a thing. This is when Project Runway was a thing, and like Paris Hilton and Nicole Richie and all these super skinny people and like Tyra Banks, Naomi Campbell, all these models were like a big thing. So I used to brainwash myself in a positive way. I would brainwash myself with all of these beautiful fashion images, very similar to what you're seeing on my screen here. So I would brainwash myself with all these images. I remember when I was about 16 years old in my bedroom, I used to cut out magazine like pages. So this is back when magazines were a thing. For reference, I'm 32, so I'm not that old, but yes, I did grow up reading 17 magazine. I wasn't necessarily allowed to read magazines, but I used to work at a grocery store where they had magazines, so I would just buy it and I would hide the magazine in my work apron, like the grocery store aprons that you would wear. Anyway, so I would hide the magazine in there, and then I would like bring it home, and then I would cut out all of these beautiful images of like a woman in a suit or a pretty lady with like some elegant clothing on. So imagery was another thing that I used to kind of brainwash myself in a positive way. And so my bedroom wall was literally filled, like it was covered from floor to ceiling with all of these beautiful images. By the way, they were all different races and stuff because I didn't really grow up focused on race a lot, but I had a lot of like faceless images. Maybe it was just an image of an outfit, or it was a beautiful image of like wealth or something that reminds me of luxury and all that. And I remember I naturally started to kind of manifest this fashionista vibe about myself. So it actually helped me to build my confidence because later on, when I started working at McDonald's when I was a teenager, I would save up my paycheck and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm going to get a new Juicy Couture sweatsuit. So you remember when the Juicy Couture thing was like really famous? Yeah, this is like back in the Y2K days. So I used to get my little Juicy Couture hoodies, very similar to like how Ice Spice dresses now. I noticed that she very much has like this Y2K aesthetic. It kind of reminds me of how I used to dress. But that imagery actually helped my self-esteem because I was intentional. I guess that's the best way I can describe how I started building my self-esteem was I was very intentional with the imagery that I put in front of myself. And again, this did actually come from my upbringing. So my parents, they put parental controls on everything. Like I was not allowed to listen to secular music. And so my negative influences from the Black community in particular were very diminished. Like I didn't really grow up. I didn't even know half of the rappers. I mean, even to this day, I don't even know half of the rappers. Like this whole Kendrick Lamar Drake thing, like if Kendrick Lamar would have walked past me on the street, I would have not recognized his face. I don't know not one Kendrick Lamar song to this day. And I'm not mad about that. I like the fact that I am very ruthless and closed off with what I allow in my space. And by the way, I have no idea if he actually makes good music. I know of a lot of guys that like him. My brother likes his music, so I don't know. Maybe he does make great music. But I've always been super intentional with like the images that I allow myself to see, or like the types of music that I listen to. So even to this day with R&B music, even though I love the singing, like I really love Summer Walker and SZA in particular. Those are some of my favorites. My favorite artist is actually Willow Smith, by the way. So you guys should totally listen to her album. She is a phenomenal vocalist. She is grossly underrated. I feel like she literally is incredible, especially if you're into like alternative music, rock music, jazz music. Anyway, but even with like the types of music that I listen to and stuff, I was always very intentional. So one habit that I used to build my self-esteem was anytime I saw some sort of celebrity that looked like me, or maybe she had the same phenotype, same racial background or whatever, I would instantly look that girl up online or look her up on my phone. I would follow her on Instagram, or I would like watch all of her movies. So my favorite actress growing up was Christina Milian, because she has a very similar background to me, very similar phenotype. My other favorite actresses were Tia and Tamara. So anything that they did, I was watching it. So all the movies that had, actually, I didn't watch that one TV show. I think Tamara Mori was in some sort of doctor TV show or a nursing TV show. So by that time, I was kind of too old. But when I was younger, anything that had Christina Milian in it, if it had Tia and Tamara in it, if it had anybody that looked like how I looked, like Raven Simone, her phenotype looked like mine. Her body type was different than mine, but I still liked Raven. I loved like the Cheetah Girls and all that. So I would actually go out of my way, no matter how famous the movie was, I would go out of my way to find what obscure movies these people were in. So I remember watching all these totally random movies, if I could watch them, as long as my parents hadn't blocked them with the parental control. But those were just a few of the strategies that I used when I was younger to kind of build a sense of identity for myself. And then as far as skin tone identity, so I know that for some people, they don't actually like to use the terms light-skinned or dark-skinned, and that's totally fine. I support that 100%. The only reason I even use those terms on this channel is for editing purposes. But The way that I started to develop a skin tone identity, like loving my skin tone, figuring out what my exact skin tone was, yes, I went through a lot of gaslighting, but this is something I do to this day. I like to compare my skin tone to yummy items in my kitchen. I know that some people, they don't like their skin being connected to like chocolate or something. I personally love that, but I like doing that for myself though. So if you don't like that, if that makes you feel weird, you can find a different name for yourself. But for example, I have like, if I go in the cabinet, let's say I got a tan, I might compare my skin tone to like peanut butter or something, and I might be like, oh, I'm like almost peanut butter color, or I might be like, oh, this matches me. I'm like a butter pecan, or I might get some cinnamon, or just whatever is in your kitchen. If it is anywhere near your skin tone, you can actually start comparing your skin to these different items like hazelnut, almond, because I've noticed that one thing is some women, they feel like their skin tone doesn't have any fun nicknames or any yummy nicknames or any nicknames that they associate with femininity. So I actually was intentional because once again, my self-esteem, it's my responsibility. And so if you have low self-esteem, if your age is 18 and older and you have low self-esteem, that's 100% your fault. It's your responsibility. Well, actually, I won't say it's all your fault because your parents could have messed you up, but it's your responsibility though to deal with it and to like fix it or, try to raise your self-esteem. And by the way, one thing that really set me free when it came to self esteem was recognizing that nobody on this earth has perfect confidence. There is no such thing as a human being that has 100% perfect confidence 24/7. They have a perfect mindset 24/7. They think perfect, happy thoughts 24/7. There's no such thing. So once I realized that I don't have to try to live up to perfection, that actually took so much pressure off of me because I realized, oh, wait, I don't have to try to be like this robot or anything. I can just embrace myself. I can actually accept my flaws. That was another thing that really helped me was radical self-acceptance. So even if people come on to my YouTube channel and they're like, you guys are hypocrites, you guys are doing this wrong, you're doing that wrong, I can accept that and I don't get mad because I have radical self-acceptance. So I accept my good qualities, I accept my bad qualities, I accept my flaws, I accept my own hypocrisies because I'm always going to have flaws. I'm always going to have hypocrisy. I'm never going to be perfect in every area. By the way, perfection is boring anyway. Okay, I just had to like move positions, so if the sound changed, I'm sorry. But back to the whole like building an identity and self-esteem. So when it came to the skin tone identity, it was actually a really fun experiment for me to look at all of these different fun items in my kitchen and to see like which colors looked closest to my skin tone. Like, oh, I'm honey colored, or oh, I'm like a sandy colored. Have you ever walked on the beach and like your feet kind of blend in with the sand? I view my skin tone as kind of having like this sandy type of color, or so I liked doing stuff like that and coming up with these fun nicknames or coming up with these really fun, really pretty characters. I know that for some of you guys, you only get your inspiration from movies, and I would say that's actually a mistake. One of the things I like to do is have multiple sources of inspiration. I don't like it when only one industry controls my mind. That actually makes me feel scared. I don't like that. I don't want Hollywood to be my only source of inspiration. So I try to gather inspiration from as many sources as possible because remember, the world that we live in, it's an abundant world. Beauty exists everywhere you go. Trees are beautiful, grass is beautiful, flowers are beautiful. So I view inspiration as something that should always be happening anyway. But another thing that I like to do in terms of building my own self-esteem is I like to take a break from something if I feel like it's starting to influence me too much. So if I am on Instagram too much, I will take a break from Instagram. I actually take very frequent breaks from social media. The longest break that I've ever taken from Instagram was 3 years. Yes, that's right. I took a 3-year break from Instagram. So for those of you who watch my channel a lot, or for those of you who have been on my Patreon, you guys know that I have done Instagram modeling in the past, not sexual, but just like the regular kind. But the bad thing was I was very young, first of all, when I started. I think I was like in my teens, maybe 18, 19. And so at that time, I was a little bit more impressionable. And so I spent way more time on Instagram in general than I wanted to. And it started to erode my sense of self because everything I did, it was starting to revolve around, okay, I need to get likes, I need to do this, I need to do that. And you guys already know that everybody hates on you just in general. Human beings have a tendency to just hate on people sometimes. No, I'm not saying everybody was jealous. But sometimes when I would post on Instagram, so for example, I would post a picture with my hair straight. Then people would say, why don't you post your hair curly? You hate yourself. Do you not like your hair? What's wrong with your hair? Why don't you show it curly? So then I would post with my hair curly. Then they would say, oh, why didn't you post with your hair with highlights? You can't pull off highlights though. So then I would post myself with highlights. And then it's, oh, well, you didn't go blonde though. You only had brown highlights. Why can't you do blonde highlights? Why can't you do red? And so I almost felt, when I was 19, I almost felt like I was kind of chasing trends or kind of following trends or almost like competing with keeping up, kind of keeping up with the Joneses, except I'm trying to keep up with all the beauty and fashion stuff that keeps on coming out. And back then I didn't know about fast fashion and how, they're coming out with all these new clothes all the time. They're coming out with new products 24/7. And so I will never have all of the products on earth. I will never have all of the hairstyles. And so what I actually did, and it healed my mental health a lot, what I did was I actually took a break from Instagram because another thing that happened was this was before filters and stuff. So before the filters came out, that is when I felt the best on Instagram because I wasn't using the filters or anything. I was just posting regular pictures and just uploading them. And then it became this thing to where it's like, oh no, everybody has to Photoshop their pictures and then now there are filters and now you can do all these presets and stuff. I decided to, instead of use the filters and all that, because one thing I noticed with me was the more I would edit the photo, the more I would filter it or try to do all this stuff, the less confident I felt in that photo and the less confident I felt in myself because I didn't realize it at the time, but I was allowing other people's trends. I was allowing this filter trend to influence me even though it didn't resonate with me. So if you like filters, that's fine. I actually like filters now, but back then I didn't have as much mental control. I wasn't as mentally strong as I am now. But the way that I overcame that was I literally took a long break from Instagram. I am still on Instagram now, but I like to take a lot of frequent breaks. And another thing I stopped doing with Instagram in particular was I stopped mindlessly scrolling. So when I was a teenager, I used to do a lot of mindless scrolling, a lot of mindless watching of YouTube beauty videos, except the difference was when I was watching the beauty videos, I was not actually practicing my makeup or doing my hair. I was just watching someone else doing it and like living vicariously through that person as opposed to I'm beautifying myself. And that was another thing that helped me to build self-esteem was instead of watching other girls doing their self-care, how about I play the video in the background while I'm doing my self-care as well? So instead of me just watching her painting her nails and stuff, why don't I put this nail thing on while I'm also painting my nails? So that way I'm kind of building myself up as well as opposed to watching other people live their dreams. And another thing with the whole self-esteem thing, back then, I didn't know that Instagram was a highlight reel and Facebook was a highlight reel because I was a teenager, so I wasn't as smart back then. But now I understand that when people post on social media, usually it's just a highlight reel. And this channel, I feel like with this channel, I try to balance it out between being a highlight reel versus also talking about some of our issues and kind of like finding healing from them. But I also don't want this channel to just be a highlight reel either because I know that that's not realistic and that's not like something that anybody can do. You can't just be perfect 24/7. You don't have control over everything that happens to you. So taking a lot of breaks from social media has been phenomenal for my mental health. Another thing that has built my mental health in terms of like my own beauty and confidence is seeing diverse images of beauty. So let's say I'm taking a break from Instagram. Maybe I can go on Pinterest or go on some other like, I don't know, social media account or use some other form of inspiration. And I like to show many different looks, not just on my YouTube channel, but also to myself because it helps me to remember that beauty is not a monolith. So I can tell that a lot of the women who say, oh, light-skinned women are the beauty standard, they've been watching a lot of black media probably, or a lot of black male media, or maybe they've been listening to a lot of female hip hop or something. So I really do feel like for a lot of people, their beauty standards are coming from their own algorithms. So they keep clicking on white girls or whatever girls don't look like them, or skinny girls. Let's say you're bigger and you keep clicking on skinny girls and stuff. And then, after looking at thousands upon thousands of pictures of skinny girls, you start feeling like, oh, nobody likes girls who are thick, or like I'm inferior to the skinny girls. Well, part of that is also because of your algorithm. So I kind of feel like people don't really have an excuse anymore to say things like, oh, well, the algorithm is pushing this in my face or it's shoving this in my face. It's like, well, no, it's technically not, because algorithms work based on what you click on. So if you don't want to see a particular beauty image or a particular beauty standard, you can just click on do not show me this image. Also, another thing that has been phenomenal for my self-esteem, I do not watch movies. I don't keep up with what's going on really. Occasionally I might see a movie. I think I go to the movies or watch a movie maybe a couple times a year. Pretty much I just tend to watch musicals. The last movie that I watched was The Little Mermaid, and I am going to watch Wicked. So I don't really keep up with a lot of movies unless it's a very girly slash feminine musical. Usually it has to be a musical. By the way, I don't see the unambiguous community congratulating Cynthia Everett for getting that role in Wicked, which is one of my favorite musicals. Anyway, I don't know if I'm saying her name right, but I am very selective with what I spend my time on. So yeah, I don't just sit around and scroll on Netflix. I don't watch Netflix. I don't even have Netflix. I don't have Hulu. I don't have Amazon Video or whatever. I don't have what's it called, Tubi and all that. I don't have any of those. So that has really helped me with my personal beauty standard and just me being more self-centered. Basically, what I had to learn was how to be more self-centered. So when it comes to my self-esteem and my life, I try to focus it around me. So the thing that I don't really like about Netflix and Hulu and stuff is, number one, I don't get to control the algorithm. So that's why I actually prefer social media over, I guess, mainstream media, if that's what you want to call Netflix and all that. But I tend to prefer social media because I get to control the algorithm. I get to type in the search bar, I want to look up how to build my self-esteem or like level up content. I get to type that in the search bar and curate my own channels. That's what I like about YouTube. It's like a better version of cable. So you can just change the channel, except there are literally millions of channels instead of only like a few. So those are just some of the main ways that I have built my core self-esteem. I will probably make this into a whole series, but what do you ladies think? How have you built your self-esteem? By the way, be sure to join the Patreon if you haven't already. It's only $5 a month. We also have a Discord in there. Or if you really like my content, be sure to get the Dark Femininity course. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section, and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.